Welcome to Beyond Bridge, the podcast where courage meets community. We shine a light on the stories, science, and support that define the breast cancer journey. From survivors and thrivers to doctors and advocates, we're here to share real conversations, expert insights, and the hope that carries us forward. Whether you're newly diagnosed, a lifelong fighter, or walking alongside someone you love, this is your space, your voice, and your story. Welcome to the Bridge Community Podcast. Today, our guest is Lauren Barber. Lauren has been with Bridge for about 4 years, and her research area is in neighborhoods, sleep, and breast cancer. Welcome to the podcast, Lauren.
Thank you.
I should say Dr. Barber, although she was like, oh, you don't have to call me doctor. But she's done a lot of work to get that title and that recognition. So, Lauren, tell our audience what brought you to Bridge and what was your motivation for being a part of this community?
So about 13 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was triple negative breast cancer, DCIS, so luckily early stage, which was good. But I remember when she was diagnosed thinking to myself, what caused my mom to be diagnosed with breast cancer? What happened? And what was the reason behind it? And I also remember looking up a lot of statistics about breast cancer in Black women, and I was just kind of floored by the disparities that are present in breast cancer. And so some of those disparities are Black women are more likely to be diagnosed with aggressive forms of breast cancer, and they're also more likely to die from their breast cancer.
Okay, so you told us what they were. So define for our audience what a disparity is. Are you able to do that? Tell us what that is.
So a disparity is a difference in health outcome that is unjust. Like, it's not fair. It's not a difference that you would expect to see. And so in terms of breast cancer, Black women being diagnosed with a more aggressive form of breast cancer, that's a disparity, because why should it be that one particular group of women or one particular group of people are having a more aggressive form? Like, what you wouldn't necessarily expect that to happen, because usually biology is pretty similar across groups. So the disparity, it means that this difference that we see is an unfair difference, and there's something that must be happening that must be causing this one group to experience like a cancer burden.
And so you wanted to find out what caused that disparity based upon what you were dealing with your mom.
Yeah, exactly. You see something like that and you think, that's not fair. Why is that happening? And why are Black women like my mom being diagnosed with these aggressive forms of breast cancer? So that's really what drew me to wanting to study breast cancer. I don't think I realized that it was a career path per se. At that time, I was at a stage in my life where I was also trying to figure out what my career was going to be, and I didn't quite know. And so I was essentially seeking advice from a family friend who I didn't realize at the time was an epidemiologist, but was an epidemiologist. And I remember telling him about like these disparities that I found, and why is this the case that Black women are more likely to be diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer and die from their breast cancer. And he looked at me and was like, oh, that's a career, like trying to understand what causes cancer. Like, sounds like you might be interested in cancer epidemiology. And so that was kind of my first introduction to this field, and that it's something that I could potentially study. And so, that's what essentially brought me to cancer epidemiology and wanting to study disparities. And then a lot of my research has been focused on trying to understand how neighborhoods and factors within a neighborhood influence breast cancer disparities. And then I'm also really interested in understanding how sleep influences breast cancer disparities.
Okay, so neighborhoods and sleep. So in my mind, those are just on the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? They're two different things. Okay, yeah. So share with us what your research has uncovered, or what you are learning in your research as it relates to neighborhoods. What's going on at that level?
Yeah, so a lot of my research has focused on looking at markers of neighborhood deprivation because neighborhoods are very complex. And there are a lot of different factors that kind of get rolled up into the neighborhood environment. And so neighborhood deprivation is one way to try and summarize all those characteristics of the neighborhood that might cause or might lead to certain areas being more disadvantaged than others. And so for my research, I've looked at neighborhood deprivation in relation to breast cancer mortality or breast cancer death. And I've found that, well, in addition to looking at it overall in relation to breast cancer mortality, I've looked at it among white women, and then I've looked at that among Black women to try and understand if the influence of neighborhood is different for these two different populations. And so we found for white women, we do see that living in a more deprived neighborhood is associated with an increase in breast cancer mortality. But when we look at that among Black women, we don't really see the same thing. The association isn't really there. So it seems like, well, when you look at it, it would seem like, oh, it doesn't really matter if Black women live in a deprived neighborhood or not. That's not going to increase their risk of breast cancer mortality. And so it might lead you to think that like neighborhoods aren't important for Black women, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's really that neighborhoods are important, but there are other factors besides neighborhoods that are also important. So just because you isolate this association between neighborhood and breast cancer mortality, it doesn't mean that breast cancer mortality won't happen for Black women. There are other factors that are also playing a role.
Okay, let me have you to rewind just 1 second. Tell us again, you said you saw differences in white women and Black women who both live in deprived areas, and white women and Black women are diagnosed about the same. Did I hear you say that, or was not? Tell us again.
Yeah, so in terms of diagnoses, white women are more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer than Black women. But Black women are more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. And among those women that are living in a deprived neighborhood, we see that being in a deprived neighborhood increases the risk of dying from breast cancer for white women. But being in a deprived neighborhood does not increase the risk of dying from breast cancer for Black women. And we think that's largely because we see that racial disparity in mortality, in breast cancer mortality. So regardless of the neighborhood that a Black woman lives in, they're likely going to experience a higher risk of dying from their breast cancer compared to white women. So it doesn't matter if they live in a deprived neighborhood. It might not matter if they live in a more affluent neighborhood. They tend to have just a higher risk of dying from breast cancer in general. And so neighborhoods might not be playing as big of a role in breast cancer mortality for Black women as it is for white women.
And so when we say deprivation, break that down for the audience for us.
Yeah, so deprivation, it's really talking about a lot of different factors, like negative type factors within a neighborhood environment. So deprivation, when we think about it as like a concept, it means that there is a concentration of poverty in a neighborhood. There might be a concentration of individuals who might not have a college education. So we might see lower educational attainment within that neighborhood. We might see that there are houses that might be more dilapidated or falling apart, maybe more vacant lots, and housing or homes that have lower housing values. Fewer people might own their homes. So it's kind of getting at like these negative aspects of a neighborhood environment that might not be conducive to a healthy lifestyle.
So some of those things happen to be economic factors.
Yes, they are very much tied to
Economics.
Yes.
Right. And we know that in general, white Americans make more money and have more disposable income than Black Americans do.
Exactly. And that translates into the neighborhoods that they live in.
That's interesting stuff. Okay. So I think you touched on this a little bit because you said that biology is the same, right? You said that earlier. So you don't see any biological differences in breast cancer incidence and survival among women?
Well, we do see that there are some biological differences, but biology doesn't explain everything. And so we see that there are some differences because we do know that Black women are diagnosed with more aggressive forms of breast cancer. Potentially that could be biology playing a role, but it also could be social factors, neighborhood factors, these factors outside of biology that could be interacting with biology to make certain types of biological factors more prominent in one population than another because they're being exposed to these environmental factors. So biology is important, but so are all the other contexts in which we live and the environmental exposures that we come into contact with.
Now you said you also are studying sleep. So let's talk a little bit about that. I know that I am attempting to get better sleep because I understand that sleep is important for aging. It's important as to help your body to restore what you've done the entire day. And so adequate sleep really does play a role in, quote unquote, your longevity in some ways. So talk to us a little bit about the sleep and breast cancer.
Yeah, so you hit on all those points. Sleep is very important, and I think more and more research is telling us that sleep is important for health. It's important for our immune system. It's important for our mental health. It's important for memory and cognition. And it does allow your body to recharge itself and be ready for the day to fight off diseases like cancer. And so I have been really interested in trying to understand how sleep plays a role in cancer. And one way is through the immune system. So your immune system is very important on how well you sleep, how long you sleep. And so if you're not sleeping well, then your immune system will become weakened. And when cancer is present or when cancer is starting to develop, your immune system is really important for being able to recognize that cancer and fight it off. So if you aren't getting as good sleep, then your immune system might be compromised, and that might prevent your body from really being able to fight off that cancer. So I tend to think that sleep could potentially be important for breast cancer and cancer in general. There hasn't been as much research dedicated to studying sleep in cancer, so that's something that I hope to do more of in coming years.
So based upon what you already know, based upon the research that you have already conducted, what's a good range of sleep? And how should that sleep happen? Some people may want to sleep straight through the night, but can you also have good sleep if you take a nap during the day? Is that part of the sleep? Or so what does that look like? What does the sleep factor look like?
So for adults, they typically recommend 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And I will say that the recommendations for sleep, it it's different for children, adolescents, so they tend to need to sleep for longer. But for adults, 7 to 9 hours is what they say. And, sleep looks very different for everybody. Ideally, it would be nice to sleep throughout the night. Get that 7 to 9 hours during the night so that, your circadian rhythms are essentially aligned with the light and dark cycle. But that doesn't always happen. And so some individuals might not get those 7 to 9 hours at night, and so they might want to sleep during the day to take a nap to catch up on sleep. And if you aren't getting the adequate sleep that you need at night, then napping is not a bad idea. Of course, you don't want to nap for hours and hours because then that could contribute to not being able to sleep at night. So there is a balance between catching up on sleep during the day if you're not getting the sleep you need at night, but then not getting too much during the day because you want to be on that regular pattern of getting sleep at night if you're able to do that.
So we're talking about a routine.
Yes.
And we're talking about continuous. And we're talking about at night.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. As we close out, I do want to ask you, what do you consider what are your most rewarding aspects of this work that you are doing? And how does that drive you?
Yeah, so I think some of the most rewarding aspects of doing this work is just knowing that I'm contributing to work that is seeking to understand disparities, seeking to mitigate disparities. So it's work that I hope is helping Black women and helping Black women who are diagnosed with cancer. Black women like my mom, I want to be doing research that is helping to understand, like, why did she get the cancer that she got, and what can we do to try and prevent other women from getting cancer. So I think just having that knowledge of contributing is really rewarding. And I think another rewarding part is being able to communicate my research with others. And so this is just a story that kind of goes back to my mom. But when I was a PhD student, I had defended my dissertation, and so I had a big presentation to talk about my dissertation research. And afterwards, I remember my mom coming up to me and telling me, "You did such a good job. I understood everything that you said in your presentation." And it felt so nice to hear my mom say that, because it's not always easy trying to communicate what you do to someone who might not be in the field. So I think having the ability to communicate your research with others and have them understand it, internalize it, be able to use that research is really important and rewarding.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for being with us. And I understand that your mother was the catalyst. She was the passion behind what you do. And one thing that I always say is that our private pain ends up having a public purpose. Thank you so much, Robin.
Yeah, thank you.
Beyond Bridge, a place of strength, support, and shared stories. If the conversation touched your heart, be sure to share it with someone walking this journey. And always remember, you are not alone. God walks with you, even in the valleys. Lean on His promises, trust His timing, and never lose hope. Until next time, may you be covered in grace, filled with courage, and surrounded by love. I am Jacqueline Anthony. For all of us at Bridge, thanks for joining the conversation.